Case from practice. A mature man, slightly over 50, had a much younger female colleague assigned to share his office. His children were already grown and living separately, and his intimate life with his wife had essentially ended about 3 years prior. Neither of them had gone through menopause, but his wife, his peer in age, one day simply decided that they'd lived enough and intimacy was no longer necessary. She started focusing on the grandchildren and spending weekends at the summer house. The man tried several times to restore intimacy, but she avoided it. Eventually, his own sexual activity declined. When he had morning erections, he occasionally watched porn. They were quietly growing old. Neither made an effort to stay in shape, but the constant presence of a young woman shook him awake. He bought a new suit and shoes. Instead of plaid and blue shirts, he started wearing white ones. As he later explained, just being around the young co-worker brought back regular erections, and he started feeling young again. Their relationship developed slowly. At first, the woman didn't view him as a potential partner. But when she fell into depression after breaking up with her boyfriend, the man gave her attention, took her to restaurants, and helped solve her problems. It took almost a year before they began a sexual relationship. Once they became intimate, the man drastically changed his lifestyle. He started running, quit alcohol, and lost weight. 6 months later, he filed for divorce and left his family. His wife responded with loud arguments and scandals. She didn't change anything about herself and only pushed him further away. I only learned of the situation after the divorce, when the woman fell into a severe depression, especially after her adult children developed a close relationship with their father's young new wife. She saw this as personal betrayal and didn't want to go on living. It took several months of work to help her regain interest in life. But after meeting her ex-husband once, I couldn't help but acknowledge his perspective. Andre, my wife rushed into old age. She did it willingly. At first, I foolishly followed her. I felt like an aging grandfather, but when I felt masculine again, I desperately wanted to live differently, live young. I was even ready to have a child with my new wife, even though I didn't originally want that. So when it came to the choice, stay in the marriage and grow old or end it and truly live, I chose to live. And I won't apologize for that. I have the right to live. So women must understand labeling yourself as an aunt after 40 or a grandmother after 50 is a risky life strategy because your husband might not accept it and may respond with infidelity or even leave the family. At 50 or even at 60, you must do your best to prolong youth, energy, sexuality, social engagement, and activity as much as possible. That is the right strategy to prevent betrayal after 45. Case from practice. The couple had been married for about 20 years. Unfortunately, around 5 years into the marriage, the wife began communicating too warmly and informally with a male colleague. This gave the husband reason to feel jealous and suspect she was being unfaithful. The wife never admitted to any affair, but she continued the communication and refused to leave the job, even though her husband demanded it. She insisted that men and women can be just friends. When the couple reached their 40s, the frequency of their intimate life declined. The husband slowly started drinking, including at work, where there was a fun group of adult colleagues, some of whom were divorced women. He began spending more time with one of them, a lively, attractive, and notably slimmer woman than his wife. His wife noticed the texting and his cheerful laughter, but he used her old argument, "We're just friends." She was outraged, but the husband continued the communication. Unfortunately, the wife took a negative path. Instead of improving her appearance, rekindling intimacy, or reviving shared leisure activities with her husband, she became confrontational, stopped sex entirely, and began going out to cafes with friends in the evenings. Eventually, the husband began having sex with the colleague, who was a few years older than both him and his wife. Their children were finishing school, and the lover's child had gone off to university in another city. After about a year of the affair, and amid cold relations at home, the man moved in with his lover. There he had alcohol, energetic sex, mutual workplace benefits, and a comfortable lifestyle. By the time the wife sought consultation, it was too late. The man had been living with his mistress for more than 6 months and had already invested in expanding her apartment closer to his workplace. Their children remained neutral, and the 45-plus-year-old woman was left to suffer alone. The couple divorced. I was able to help her come to terms with what happened, change her appearance and communication style with men, and find a new partner, older but youthful, eventually forming a new marriage. The ex-husband didn't remarry, but lived comfortably with his mistress, enjoying food, alcohol, and travel. In this case, the woman's past mistakes in the marriage, the decline in sexual activity, her rigid confrontation over the husband's socializing, and her late visit to a psychologist all worked against her. As she herself admitted, she didn't believe in psychologists and considered reduced sex after 40 perfectly normal. Those assumptions led to her errors. Case from practice. A young woman in her early 30s asked her husband to help her longtime friend buy a car. The two women had been friends for over 15 years, and the wife trusted her completely. They had a young school-aged child and a mortgage. The friend was single and childless. She wasn't particularly attractive and was craving male attention. She desperately wanted to have a child and was prepared to do it alone. The husband spent a few weekends helping her choose a car, and they eventually bought one. During that time, the husband and the wife's friend started actively chatting in messengers. After the business discussions, jokes, and even erotic anecdotes followed. After the car purchase, the woman held a big celebration and christened the car. She thanked a married friend and asked if it was okay to keep talking to her husband about car maintenance and driving practice. The husband and the friend kept in touch legally. The two women continued their friendship. When the sexual relationship between the man and the wife's friend actually began remains unclear. Perhaps after 6 months, maybe a year. A couple of years later, the friend told the wife she had found a man. A year after that, she had a baby. 3 years after the car purchase, the wife noticed that the child's patronymic matched her husband's rare name. The child looked just like him. She carefully checked her husband's phone and found money transfers and erotic texts. The wife went into a rage, invited the friend over, and unleashed a brutal confrontation with both her and her husband, including throwing his things off the balcony. The friend cried and apologized, saying she never meant to break up a family, she just really wanted a baby. The husband could only mumble, "I'm sorry, it just happened. Please don't kick me out." In my session, he explained that his wife refused to have a second child, though he had asked repeatedly. So his and the friend's interests aligned. Meanwhile, the wife had sunk into esoteric courses and drifted away from reality and femininity. At that moment, the wife kicked her husband out and forbade all contact with the child. The husband came to see me, expressing a deep desire to return to the family. I advised him not to argue about seeing the child, not to provoke his wife, and not to move in with the lover or post anything online about them being together. To her credit, the lover acted very respectfully and allowed him the space to make his own decision, something rare. After 3 to 4 months of no contact, though the husband kept sending money, the wife finally reached out. She refused to have a second child but agreed to work with him at his large company where there were open positions. Allowing him to see the illegitimate child was a difficult issue. The child had grown used to his father, and the father was involved. After several emotional setbacks and further sessions, we created a transparent arrangement where the husband could see the child without seeing his former lover. Since the wife now worked with him, her suspicions faded. The man was generally very respectable, and in my view, her refusal to have another child, combined with her retreat into spiritual hobbies, was her major mistake. While I don't condone the man's actions, planning a child outside the marriage is a serious offense, I was committed to helping him save the marriage. Interestingly, both he and his wife, when seeing other therapists separately, were advised to divorce. But since both of them still wanted the marriage and the child was already grown, I worked with what they had. In the end, the family lived quite stably. Case from practice. A young man in his early 30s worked in a management position and had many social contacts. He wore suits, looked good, but earned modestly. He lived in his wife's apartment, which had been gifted to her by her parents. They had a preschool-aged child. His wife worked. Their relationship was fine, but lacked passion, just like many others. One day, a co-worker told him that he had slept with a woman in the company and discovered she enjoyed anal sex. This intrigued the man. He suggested trying it with his wife. She was outraged by the proposal. When he brought it up again, she threatened, "Ask me once more, and I'll pack your things and throw you out." Up to that point, the topic of housing had never bothered the man. But from that moment on, he felt completely powerless in his own home. This prompted him to take financial risks at work that he had previously avoided. After about 3 years, he managed to secretly save up enough money and bought a 1-bedroom apartment under his aunt's name. Then he made a deliberate effort to sleep with that same coworker, the one who had given anal sex to his friend, who had since transferred to another city. He wasn't concerned about her reputation, even though she had many partners. She became his mistress, and he experienced a wide range of sexual activities. According to the man, he simply wanted to satisfy his curiosity and male pride. His reasoning was, "If other men can enjoy all kinds of sex, why can't I?" His wife's rejections deeply wounded him. He stopped feeling like a man in his own home. Even though he hadn't intended to fall in love, he did. After a couple of years, the man was promoted. He took his mistress with him to the new location, where she became useful in his shady financial dealings. She started asking him to leave his family. He then offered his wife to have a second child, but she was nearing 40 and refused. That's when the man laid everything out. the sexual frustration, the apartment issue, and announced the divorce. Unexpectedly for her, he moved into his other apartment. The wife changed her mind and said she was ready to have another child, but the mistress was already pregnant, and that closed the discussion. I worked with the divorce situation and their child, who was experiencing deep stress and his mother's emotional breakdowns. I managed to talk to the man. His stance was simple. Despite his career success, he had never felt like a real man in his own home, and that had become painful over time. He was concerned about the new woman's reputation, but this was resolved by relocating both of them to a different city where no one knew her. She completely devoted herself to him in both work and bed. She was financially dependent and emotionally non-confrontational. So in the end, the humiliating comments about the apartment, the sharp rejections in sex, and the wife's unwillingness to adapt led to the collapse of what had once been a strong family and ultimately a tragedy for the wife and their child.